morning, everyone. It's Ronnie Jo again, dietetic intern, RD to B. It is National Diabetes Month, and yesterday was National Diabetes Day. So I was going to take this opportunity to talk about diabetes. So a lot of people don't know the difference between the types of diabetes, how to identify diabetes, and stuff like that. So I was gonna say that I rolled out of bed like this, but I did not. This took like a half an hour, if not longer, to create. So here you go. Anyways, it's cold here today again. Nobody ever told me that when you move to southern Louisiana that it does get cold. So the more you know. It's like in the 40s today again. The other day it was like 25 when I woke up. It was really gross. But our heat got fixed, so that's great. Okay, sorry, getting off topic. Okay, so diabetes. I'm going to talk about normal body function, the difference between a diabetic and a person with normal body function when it comes to blood sugars. I'm going to talk about the difference between type 1 and type 2 diabetes, risk factors, stuff like that. I'm going to debunk some myths about diabetes. I'm going to talk about something called DKA, and I'm going to talk about hyper and hypoglycemia. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so I have cards again today. So my first card is this one. I'll let you look at it for a second. Okay, so in a normal, healthy adult individual, when you eat a meal, your blood sugar goes up, and this kind of tells the pancreas that it needs to produce insulin, and then the insulin goes to the cells and tells the cells that it needs to pull some of that sugar in so it can be used for energy, and then effectively your blood sugar lowers because the cells are bringing in sugar from the blood to be used for energy throughout your body. It's very important. There's more complex than this, but this is as good as it gets for simplicity. So sorry if it's too complicated, but this is essentially what happens and how the body regulates blood sugar in a normal human being. Okay, so with diabetes, the yellow highlighted part is affected. So the blood sugar goes, it tells the pancreas that it needs insulin, but sometimes the pancreas is damaged and can't produce insulin or can't produce enough insulin. Or when the insulin gets to the cells, it can't, like the cells don't recognize that they're supposed to pull in sugar. So that's what diabetes is. It's the inability for the cells to bring in sugar from your blood. Okay. Hopefully I haven't lost anybody yet. Okay. So there are two main types of diabetes. There are type 1 and type 2 diabetes. So type 1 is primarily called juvenile diabetes, and that's because majority of people get it in childhood. It is possible to get it later in life, but usually you'll get it in your childhood, and it's caused by like an immunoresponse. So a virus of some sort enters your body starts to fight it, but in this fight it destroys its own cells. So it destroys the pancreatic beta cells, and those cells produce insulin. So your body effectively killed off the cells needed to produce insulin, and therefore your body no longer produces insulin. This is in type 1 diabetics. It is incurable. It just sort of happens, and it really sucks, but that's what happens. Type 2 diabetes is more common. It's 90 to 95% of all cases are type 2. It is preventable, which is great. Just like type 1, the beta cells in the pancreas have been damaged in some way. They either are fully damaged or just slightly damaged and produce either no insulin or some insulin. But also, the cells themselves, like that take up the sugar, could be desensitized to the insulin response. So the insulin goes to the cell and the cell doesn't register that it's supposed to take the sugar in. So there could also be that problem as well with type 2 diabetes. So they're both hard to manage and very complicated. But this is a good kind of baseline so you know the difference between type 1 and type 2. Type 1 is not preventable, it just sort of happens, your body does not produce insulin. Type 2, it is preventable, your body may produce insulin and your cells may be desensitized to the insulin response. Okay. Yeah. So, I want to talk about some myths about diabetes, and I want to talk about some risk factors for diabetes. So, some myths are that, my favorite one is that people who are diabetic cannot eat sugar, and that is false. People who are diabetic can eat sugar. They just have to adjust the amount of insulin that they use for the sugar that they are consuming. Another popular one with sugar is that sugar causes diabetes. Sugar does not cause diabetes. In type 2 diabetics, diet does play a role in diabetes, but sugar does not cause diabetes. So if you eat a whole bunch of sugar one day, you're not going to automatically be a diabetic. So don't worry about that. Just don't worry about that. Another thing is that being overweight causes diabetes. Being overweight is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes, but being overweight does not mean that you automatically have diabetes. There's a lot of people who are obese and overweight that do not have diabetes. So yeah, that's false. Another thing is that people who are newly diagnosed diabetics with type 2, they automatically need insulin. The only time you automatically need insulin is in type 1 diabetes. In type 2 diabetes, you could not need insulin. And then the last one, I already kind of talked about this, but that diabetes is easy to manage. Diabetes is the opposite of easy to manage, as I said before. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's metabolism is different. So everybody requires a different amount of insulin or other medications for type 2 diabetes. And it's hard to get it under control. And as you get older, you need different levels of insulin. And your body could respond differently to different foods than what is considered normal. So it's extremely hard to manage. And when it's mismanaged, you could end up in the hospital. And frequently people do end up in the hospital because something goes out of whack with their diabetes and they go into diabetic ketoacidosis. Yeah, so it's extremely hard to manage. It's expensive to manage. So insulin is very expensive. I hope that everybody has seen the news about that. Insulin is one of the most expensive things when it comes to life-saving medicines, life-sustaining medicines, and it's really a shame that it costs that much money. There are resources at hospitals and doctors' offices to decrease the price of diabetes management equipment and insulin, but it's still very expensive. Okay, so I mentioned diabetic ketoacidosis. It's also known as DKA. I do have a thing on it because in the hospital lately, this is my second week at the hospital, and I have seen a lot of people be admitted with this. And it made me realize just how hard diabetes is to manage. My stepdad is a type 1 diabetic, but he's gone through this. It just happens. Your life is busy. You get busy, you forget, or, like your life can't revolve around, your diabetes. You have other things to do. And so sometimes this happens, and knowing when it's happening is good because you'll be able to go to the hospital, and then the hospital will be able to take care of you. So, wanted to talk about the mechanisms kind of behind diabetic ketoacidosis. So, as we talked about with diabetics, there's an insulin deficiency somewhere. Either you forgot to take your insulin that day, or you didn't take enough, or your body reacted weirdly to something. And so there's an insulin deficiency. And so we see here that there is decreased glucose uptake. That is just a fancy way of saying that your cells are not taking in the sugar. And when your cells are not taking in the sugar, they're like, oh, well, we still need energy. Let's go to proteins. Let's break down some muscle. Let's get some proteins. So they break down the proteins, and those become amino acids. We talked about that in the proteins video. They become amino acids, and then they go into something called gluconeogenesis, which is just a fancy term for creating sugar. And then since your blood already has a lot of sugar in it, and because the insulin's not working, because you don't have insulin to bring in the sugar into your cells, and then the cells create more sugar, you get even more sugar in your blood, and you become extremely hyperglycemic. Hyper means high. So you have very, very high blood sugars. At the same time, because why not, your body's like, okay, well, we still need energy. Let's go to fats now, the other macronutrient. And as we talked about in our fats video, the fats get broken down into free fatty acids. The free fatty acids then get converted into ketones. And when ketones get built up into your blood, they cause ketoacidosis. So why is that bad? Well, as you see in this word, there's acid. Your blood likes to be at a certain pH. If it's not, it's deadly. So when ketones enter your body or enter your blood, they cause your blood pH to lower, effectively causing like an acid effect, and can put you into a coma and can kill you. So that is why managing your diabetes is very important. Getting help managing your diabetes is really important, because if you are in DKA for too long, you will die, which is scary. We don't want you to die. But if you go into the hospital, if you identify that you are going into diabetic ketoacidosis and you go to the hospital can help. If it's not too late, the hospital can help. So that is important. Hospital, hospital, hospital. So I hope I haven't lost anybody yet. It's a lot. It's a lot of science. Okay. So I talked about hyperglycemia a little bit. And so I have a card about hyper and hypoglycemia. So as you can see, hyperglycemia is when your blood sugars are really high. And hypo means low. And so when you have hypoglycemia, that means your blood sugars are really low. Okay. Some symptoms in general of hyperglycemia are increased thirst, blurred vision, increased urination, so going to the bathroom a lot, and numbness of the feet. And some symptoms of hypo are hunger. So if, when you get hungry, it usually means your blood sugars are pretty low. So you need to eat to bring the blood sugars back up in a normal person. Your heart's racing. When you're hypoglycemic, you have nausea and you have sweating, and sometimes you can pass out and you can be confused and act in ways that you wouldn't normally act. So usually if you're acting in ways you don't normally act, it's a good sign to go to the hospital. just in general. So with diabetics, you can go from hyper to hypo. So scenario, you realize that you are hyperglycemic, you have too much sugar, so you take an insulin shot, and then it's not working, so you take another insulin shot, and then you have too much insulin now, and then it acts all at once, and your blood sugars drastically drop, sending you into hypoglycemia, which is why diabetes is so hard to manage. It's because sometimes the insulin doesn't register right away and causes you to bounce from hyper to hypo, hyper to hypo. So that's another reason it is so hard to manage. So hard to manage. Okay. I think today's good. That's all really the information I have. I know it's a lot of information. I've been talking for 16 minutes. So, I'll go over it again. So, normal diabetic, or normal person, non-diabetic, your pancreas produces insulin. The insulin signals the cells to bring in the sugar, effectively lowering your blood sugar. Type 1 diabetes is usually diagnosed in children. You don't produce insulin at all. You can have a little pump that you can buy now that monitors your glucose and administers insulin when appropriate. And that's great if you don't have to do that. Type 2 is preventable, is not curable. No diabetes is curable. They are working on cures for it, but right now, type 2 diabetes is just preventable. Living a healthy lifestyle in general can help you prevent type 2 diabetes. Keeping a healthy weight, exercising, eating fiber, eating less processed sugars, all that sort of stuff. Anything to help your body maintain equilibrium is good. In type 2, the beta cells in your pancreas may be destroyed, they may not be, or the insulin signals are not being registered on your cells due to desensitization. Type 1, type 2, type 1, type 2, type 1, type 2. Okay. And if you can't control your blood sugars, you could go into diabetic ketoacidosis, which can lead to death. So, too many ketones in your blood decreases the pH, makes your blood acidic, and can kill you. It's also has hyperglycemia attached to it because your body just keeps producing sugar to try to, combat not having any sugar being taken in from the cells. Debunk some myths. People with diabetes can get sugar. Sugar does not cause diabetes. Being overweight does not cause diabetes. Although keeping a healthy weight can help prevent diabetes. Just because you're diabetic, unless you are type 1, you don't automatically need insulin. As I've said many times in this video, diabetes is not easy to manage. If you or someone you know exhibits symptoms of diabetes, so as I said, excessive thirst, frequent urination, long periods of time of hyperglycemia, significant weight loss even, you should go to the doctor and get checked for diabetes. And I'll kind of put like normal, pre-diabetes, and diabetic blood sugars below to kind of help you understand if you go to the doctor and get diagnosed as a diabetic, and your doctor is like, your blood sugar is high, and you ask him what that means. And sometimes doctors are not that great at explaining it, or sometimes patients are not great at asking. So you can look in a chart to see what that really means. Yeah, and I talked about hyper and hypo. So some other complications from diabetes I want to mention real quick, just to reiterate, trying to manage your diabetes and trying to get checked for diabetes is, so I talked about ketoacidosis, which can lead to death, but there's also, you can have heart disease from unmanaged diabetes. You can have retinopathy, which is your eyes, your retinas start dying. You can have nephropathy, which is your kidneys, so your kidneys can start dying. You can have neuropathy, which are your nerves, so your nerves can start dying. So there's a lot of things that can go wrong if you don't get your diabetes diagnosed, or you mismanage, or you can't manage your diabetes. There are people to help, dietitians, doctors, nurses, everybody is here to help. You just gotta find the right system for you. Yeah. So if you have any questions, concerns, want to ask me anything, I'm always here. So have a great day, y'all.